Valley.
There we go. It says it's been live now.
Loading. And we might be going live now. It seems that we are live. So welcome to the Scale Up Valley podcast. Apologies for being some minutes late. Welcome to the Scale Up Valley podcast, where we bring the best tech leaders in the world from Silicon Valley, New York, London, Barcelona, Madrid, Berlin, Paris, and Asia to share their experiences and their scaling up journeys, scaling companies from 2 million to 100 million ARR. Today, I have the very special guest, and I'm very proud of announcing that today we'll have Miguel Arias, the Global Entrepreneurship Director at Telefónica, which was also the CEO, the COO at Carto, a very well-known company in Spain and abroad. Welcome, Miguel.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So and let's start by getting to know a little bit more about yourself and how did you went leading Telefónica. I know that you are also a business angel. You have been also on the scale up side. So you have a different perspective about the scaling up journey as an operator, as an investor, as an executive, etc. So yeah, feel free to introduce yourself.
Wonderful. So I'm going to tell you a 15 years story in 2 to 3 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to just compress everything a bit, right? So I started my professional journey as an entrepreneur and my first company, which started, like almost 14, 15 years ago. So before entrepreneurship was a thing in Spain, right? Before all the boom and hype that we have right now. And it was a webcasting and virtual events company. And we were able to grow that all bootstrapped. I mean, there was almost no access to funding at the time in Spain and of course, with many highs and lows, right? This is a big roller coaster. So over 11 years, we were able to scale that to a company around 40 people, starting with physical events, then moving to virtual events. And we were lucky enough to be able to sell the company to the American leader in the sector called On24. So after that, what they would call in the US a decent exit, we were able to then learn to be Americans for a few years during the integration period, as you can imagine. and after that, after these 2 years lockup period, I was thinking what to do with my life. And two of the best people I've ever worked with, two former colleagues at my first startup at Imaste, they had started another business, right? Javier and Sergio. And it's good to see how you can cross-pollinize, right? In an ecosystem and work from one company to the other. So they asked me to join the rocket ship. And when you're asked to join a rocket ship, you just jump in, right? So at the time, the company is called Visuality. Now it's called Carto, right? And I joined when we were like 10, 12 people. And it was a company with a very strong technical arm, great product, but still weak arm in everything else. So from operations to finance to sales. And I was able to join as chief operating officer and do, I would say, everything that the CEO doesn't want to do. That was more or less my job description. And it was a very, very nice ride, right? I mean, for 4 years, we were able to raise over $40 million by the likes of Axel or Sales for Ventures or Kibo in Spain, grew the company to more than 100 team members, enterprise SaaS business, right? So offices and headquarters in New York and also offices in DC, buying or acquiring another startup in Estonia. So the full package of high growth SaaS enterprise, mostly in the market of location intelligence. So it was a very nice ride, but after 4 years and a half of doing that, I was commuting bi-weekly in Madrid, New York, right? So 10 days in New York, 20 in Madrid, which is not too easy also on the personal side. Absolutely. So in that moment, I mean, I think the role of the COO is to build teams, to build a great sales team with a great VP marketing, a great operations team, a great finance team, great marketing team. And over time, you start having all these US-based great operators which have all the experience who do it much better than you do. So I was thinking what to do with my life a bit after all these great years. And then I got a very, very interesting opportunity, which is to do my first corporate gig ever as the global responsible for all the entrepreneurial efforts at Telefónica, right? And it's a big team. It's a big, I would say, reach, right? We're talking about 11 countries, a lot of different venues, and I'm managing WIDA, which is a very well-known project in Europe and Latin America. So it gives me the opportunity to see many, many different ecosystems, many technologies at once, which is great. Invest in many different companies. And as you mentioned, I've been a business angel before, but it's different, right? I did 8 investments. It's a very expensive hobby I have. And, and now I get to invest. I mean, I did already 50 in my first year and a half, right, in Telefónica. So I'm learning a lot, right? For somebody who has always been on the other side of the table as an entrepreneur, to be within the corporation it's an amazing learning experience, and it's also eye-opening.
Absolutely, and also to resist the temptation of letting those teams know what you would do or what you recommend to do right away if you were in their position, at the same time helping them to think.
Yeah.
I imagine how difficult it is in my role as advisor and coach. Sometimes it's very easy and very tempting to jump in and say you should do this and this.
Yeah, many times you still do, right? But it doesn't work like that.
That's another story. Okay, perfect. And if you could tell us a little bit more about the investment thesis of Telefónica and WIDA, so for the ones who are listening to understand what is your focus in terms of investment.
Yeah, I mean, you need to think that WIDA started like 8 years ago. So we still have like a long history of doing over 800 investments, right? I mean, we have now a portfolio of around 500 companies. So we talk about scale here. When a big corporation does something, it takes scale, right? At the beginning, it was mostly about democratizing access to entrepreneurship in many ecosystems where there was almost nothing happening in terms of entrepreneurial support, like Latin America. Over time, this has evolved so much, right? There is so much more money now in all these ecosystems, so much more sophistication. So the ecosystem has matured, the entrepreneurs have matured, our thesis has matured too over time. Had to, right? Actually, last year, after I came in, we relaunched WIDA, right? We did like a reset about, hey, times change, we learned so much. So what's the new thesis? So this is what I'm going to tell you about, right? I mean, we knew that we had to work with more mature entrepreneurs because our main key goal, and actually our main value prop, is that we are able to offer revenue generation for the startups. I mean, if it's for the money, they will not take our money because we have the corporate on the table. If it needs to be about offering market validation and access to our customers, right? So if that's the key value prop, we have to work with a bit more mature startups, which have already some market fit and can then produce that match, right? So first thing, working with more mature startups. We don't talk about super big ones, but at least 10, 30 team members, initial revenues of $500,000, $2 million. I mean, we need to have companies which are already showing some promising traction. And then it needs to be close to us in things that we can provide value, that we understand, that we can offer technical help. Scale is our new motto, right? We scale startups. Right. So we work on IoT, cybersecurity, video, data for sure, in all forms, and networks. I mean, it needs to be, for sure, telcos are wide in their scope, but it needs to be in that scope, right? And I would say then, we think about that's the areas. We invest a ticket around 150K, and we always co-invest with others. So probably we are in the post-seed, pre-series A, series A. That would be the key range. Probably not the first check. We were the first check before. Now we are probably not the first check in the company, right? So that gives you an idea. But if you ask me then, what do we look at to invest? That's like the first filtering. For us, is mostly the team. What is the team, the composition, how are their motivation, expertise, why are they doing what they're doing, the market. how big is the market, and how aligned that is with Telefonica's vision, right? We try to look into that.
Right.
And we don't, I would say we don't look so much in 5 years projections at that stage.
Got it. Got it. Sounds good. And in terms of nowadays, as you're saying, there is much more liquidity in the market, and we might have the opposite paradox of the past, that a bunch of startups were kind of desperate to find a very few number of investors and of capital.
Yeah.
Sometimes nowadays we have the opposite. We have a lot of investors trying to compete to cooperate to get in very few deals that are really promising and that are showing traction and a lot of potential in the future. So it's good to see, and I like to ask our guests that have also the investment art in their roles nowadays, if they have any story about a company that was really, really hard to join. Do you have any example?
Yeah, I mean, well, as you said, right, it's not always easy, not anymore, right, with so much more money, and the best entrepreneurs have the connections, they know how to talk to, so they get access to the right investors. And remember, we are the corporate, right? So we, despite Telefonica's name or anything else or size, I mean, we are not the best looking girl or boy in the disco, right? So we need to be able to partner with others. We need to make sure that the teams who have that activity, which would be the great VCs, they let us a seat on the table, right? So that's important. So we need to provide value, and we need to be very humble. That's a key point. And I have a story. I mean, it's a deal we are just closing, so I won't disclose the name right now. But it shows you the idea. I mean, a great company in Latin America, second time founders. So then it makes it much more difficult because they have all the experience and the track record, with great connection to the Valley, already with big investors of the Valley in the cap table. And we could provide great value as partners, but then they say, yeah, but then just do a commercial agreement. Why do we need you in the cap table, right? So we are trying to prove that us being, we are pretty accommodating as an investor, right? We are not too averse to different valuations. We try to help. So let me be part of the team from within, not just as a commercial agreement. And that's what we managed very, very recently. It's going to be announced soon. But it's, again, if the teams has all the connections, you need to be super humble to be able to jump there. And that starts way before they start racing, right? You need to build this rapport many months before.
Absolutely. Very good story. And now I have a set of questions, and for the ones who are joining for the first time, we always have conversations with our guests around a set of very simple habits that we believe that can help companies to scale, namely applying the secret formula of the triple 2 times and double 3 times. For those who never heard about this, it's about going from 2 to 6 million, 6 to 18 million, and then from 18 to 36, 36 to 72, 72 to 144, which will give you 5 years of world-class scaling.
The way you say it seems easy.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to convince the scale-up founders out there that yeah, we all can do this. Very few will be able to do it, but you can do it.
You know what you're missing there? You're missing the plateau, right? I mean, there is always a plateau happening. Jason Lemkin explains it very well, right? Between 2 to 10 million ARR, something is going to happen to you, man, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be a plateau in leads, or some issues on tech debt or legacies, or if international expansion, your first acquisition, whatever. I mean, and probably all of this compounded. And then you're going to have a big plateau in this growth, and then you will be able to go back again.
That's a very good point. That's why usually we like to say that this would be 5 years, then you add 2 years of mistakes or of plateaus, plus
exactly.
3 years of product market fit, and you have a decade at least to scale, if everything goes well, right?
Exactly. If you nail it, 10 years. Exactly.
and the first habit is, of course, what you also talked about as one of your most important criteria to invest in a company, which is all about having a great executive or a great founding team, and then when they are scaling, a great leadership team. And the leadership team needs to change from, as you were saying, from 2 million to 5, from 5 to 10 million, from 10 to 20, 20 to 40, because the kind of skill set that we need in each stage of growth is different, and what we are trying to solve is also different. So as an operator, and as an investor, how important do you think it is to keep evolving the team by coaching them, by developing them, by attracting new people to the next stages of growth? And at the same time, how difficult do you see making these decisions for founders who were successful with some of the members of the team that now needs to tell them, thank you so much, but I believe that for the next stage, we need a different kind of profile to help the company to scale. So first, do you see different variations of leadership team? And second, how do you help the founders to make the decisions when they don't want to hurt the feelings of people that have worked side by side with them for so long?
Yeah, or even the founders themselves, right? I mean, at some point that you understand that your value to the company is much more in an advisory level in a board, or having from a strategic perspective, but not so much on day-to-day, right? I mean, many founders are amazing at building the company in the beginning and have the passion and the technology knowledge. After you have a company of 60, 100 people, it's a different game. And then it's more about how do you manage that, how you manage sales, and maybe you don't want to do that, right? And you are much better for the startup doing something else, right? So how, as a founder, you're able to leave room for somebody else to come in, take your baby, and bring it to the next level, right? So it's very hard, but it's such a important thing, right? Continuous learning, continuous evolving of everybody in the team to see how much you can stretch that, because some people are able to readapt and learn and become different persons in different stages. Amazing. And some won't, right? Some won't. So then you need to add the new people. I would say a very important thing I've seen in the past for me and for others is when you're able to connect with your peers, your trusted peers. Let me be clear, not just peers, but who is doing similar things in your same ecosystem, who you can talk to and learn about, right? I mean, not just founder to VP, but it's all the VPs of marketing or CMOs in a certain ecosystem should connect and talk, and what you're doing, you learn from others, mistakes. You get handbooks. Same with CTOs, same for sure with CEOs, right? I mean, that gives you a shoulder to cry on, which is very important. But also learning by peers is the most important learning ever. So we try to do that at WIDA, right? How we can connect in every ecosystem, not just the founders, but also the leaders with same interest, same knowledge, or similar areas of expertise, so they can talk to each other and learn from each other.
Very good point. And what is, in your perspective, what is the most difficult VP to hire?
Which one is not? No, but I have one. I have an answer for you. Particularly for foreigners in the US like us, right? I mean, in Spain and in many other countries I've been, speaking very good English is seen as a matter of you are clever, smart, or something, right? So hiring a VP sales in the US is super difficult because they speak perfect English, so you tend to think they are smart, but you don't know. But so the Americans know how to sell themselves so well, right? So then you are just as a humble European who would not talk so much about yourself, whatever. Then you hear these great people talking an incredible accent and then able to just sell themselves amazingly, and you're like you're hired. But that's a very, very hard hire to do and a very dangerous one.
Absolutely. Got it. Very, very good. So let's jump to the habit number 2, which is all about defining what is the next big milestone. Typically on those kind of business, the next big milestone that gets us closer to the next liquidity event or to the next round, as we were having a conversation with Chris Wade, which were venture partner at Octopus, and now a partner at Isomer Capital that invests in seed funds. And he was talking about this though. So the next big milestone is what gets you closer to the next funding round to keep building a category leader. And of course, this discussion can be splitted among a lot of different things. So what are the verticals that we should focus on? What are the geos that we should expand to? Should we go, as you were saying before, should we go to mid-market, to SMB, or to enterprise? We can't do all at the same time. We will be diluting our resources. So this kind of strategic decision about what is the next big thing and how can we kill all the other activities for the next quarter are super, super difficult and can quit a lot of sleep to founders. So how do you help them to get through these battles of trying to understand what they should do next?
Yeah, and if you think about that, I think the key challenge you have in seed stage is that you always think there's a missing feature you need to build in the product, right? Now let's I'm gonna just do this little feature is gonna change everything, and you add another feature, and it's crazy because most of the founders are very tech driven, and they think, yeah, I can solve this puzzle by adding more to the product before even testing. So if I can answer this with a short sentence is key focus, make your customer happy. And if you don't know who your customer is, then you have a bigger problem. But I mean, make somebody happy. I mean, if you're just making your product team happy because you're building more stuff, then that's probably not the right way. So how can we help teams to focus on the customer side? It's each of our country managers at Wida in every country, right? And is in a way the partner of a very small fund, right? If you think about that, the distribution, the capillarity, and they are trying to do that, right? I mean, hey, do more tests with customers. We give them the access to customers to do pilots, to doing commercial engagements, so customer obsession is what we bring into the table. And I think that's our key value.
Very, very, very good point. And I love it. The key focus makes your customer happy. So that's an amazing way to kind of create focus on the conversation. And in terms of geographical expansion, you were saying yourself that you were at Car2 10 days a month in New York, another 20 days in Spain. So it's very difficult to dilute yourself if you are expanding across Europe, coming from Spain to Germany and France or the UK, or trying to jump into the US, which might be even more difficult. So how do you ensure that you are not trying to do too much also in the geographical sense?
Yeah, or too much or too early. So it's a very good point. Probably you never know. At least you should have a big stronghold in your local market, have really, really proven that customers are buying from you in a repeated basis, big customers, and that you have some anchor customer on the other region, right? I mean, if you're just going just like that, like let's see how it works, super difficult, right? And particularly in the mature markets like UK or the US. So find from the local market a global player who has presence or hopefully headquarters in the US, win that customer and use that relation and that flagship customer as a way to start then building the relationship in the new one. I think, I mean, you should not open many countries. I mean, go for the more meaningful ones, which will be probably the bigger markets, US, UK, Latin, Brazil, probably, depending on what kind of company you have, right? And then focus there. And the key point that you mentioned briefly there, that devotes founders' time. I mean, there is almost no way you can delegate that. I've seen so many founders tell me, oh, we have hired somebody in the US, great accent, by the way. and it never works out. It never works out. You need to have founders' time. And that's very distressing in a personal life, right?
Absolutely. Very good point. And so in principle, and let's introduce habit number 3, if you have the right team for this specific stage of growth, and if you are very clear about what is the next milestone that we need to execute to get closer to our big area audacious goal, it's all about executing. And we know that we can have a perfect strategy and we can keep discussing the strategy again and again and again. But at the end of the day, if we don't keep testing, experimenting, and getting conclusions and going deeper into our decisions, nothing will happen. So what kind of meeting rhythms do you see in the most successful companies in your portfolio and that you have applied yourself as a CEO? So kind of dailies, weeklies, monthlies, quarterlies, any particular rhythm that was really useful for you to drive execution, alignment, communication across the team?
There are many handbooks for that, right? I would say, I mean, and it changes from small teams. I mean, when you are this Jeff Bezos concept of a two pizzas team, right? So then if you are 10, 15, then everything can be much less formal. People will communicate almost through osmosis from each other because they are sharing the space. So then we had much less organization at the beginning and much less cadence, right? But over time, when you are over 50, then a lot of things start to happen, right? And much more communication issues, different locations, different languages, misalignments happening. So there, I would say there's two very important points. One is what you mentioned, how you establish this cadence of meetings, for sure. Stand-up meetings at least once per week. I'm not a big fan of the daily ones, but it depends on which kind of teams you have and which kind of products. But weekly, for sure, we're having bi-weekly all hands of all the locations together to discuss with the CEO and the key, celebrate the key highlights and etc. And then adding more and more tools to the meetings. We're also having then quarterly reviews of the OKRs and quarterly reviews of the goals, but then also having a yearly retreat of all the people of the company, a yearly summit, and then having also quarterly exec team retreats. So in a way, you are creating these cadences to check the daily thing, the bi-weekly thing, the monthly closings with the investors, and then you align then your board meetings, which tend to be quarterly, with exec retreat meetings. So you are doing the exec retreat before the board meeting, so you are prepared for the board, but also to rethink what you're doing. There's a great book I would like to recommend to all of you exactly about this. It's called The Advantage. I think it's The Advantage, something like organizational health trumps everything in organizations. And it's by Patrick Lencioni. Very tactical book, but it talks all about these kind of things. And just one last point, if I may add that, we talk about cadence and meetings here, but a very, very important point is culture. And culture gets diluted over time, more team members. So I got a great advice by one of our board members is you need to imprint culture in people over time. And that's not easy. And rituals help. So I'm not talking about cheesy words and sentences in a wall. I'm talking about that you really define the values and they are coherent. They need to hurt. If values do not hurt, then maybe not so relevant. They need to be things that are meaningful to you, to your company. So strong values that hurt, rituals that help you imprint that from the yearly meeting of all the company, from how you talk to people, and that needs to permeate everything, right? Gives you principles to rely on.
Got it. Very good points again. So, and introducing one of the last topics of the conversation and of the show today. So if we have the right team, if we have the right direction, if we are executing and learning as quickly as possible, so we need to ensure that we have the fuel to get to the next milestone. And cash, as we know, in high growth business is critical. So what are the kind of mistakes managing cash, kind of burning too much too early instead of waiting to experiment before doubling down? Did you see over your career, or did you commit yourself managing cash along the scaling up journey?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we as entrepreneurs, we are very good at defining the expenditures, and we usually meet expenditures. When we define growth projections, we are not so good, right? But once you don't meet the growth projection, but you do meet the expenditures, then things get ugly, right? Things get a bit ugly. So I would say you need to be readjusting all the time, right? I mean, before we saw Imaste 2024, I mean, it was an 11 years journey, but we were very close to to getting out of cash a few times, right? Probably 7 to 8 times. And not all of them were at the beginning. You can think that probably 5 or 6 were at the first 1 or 2 years. Everything was really bootstrapped. But when we had already a much bigger company making much bigger revenues, even then you have then suddenly these issues where you were not getting the money from your customers, and then bam, you had a big cash problem, right? So you need to plan beforehand. You need to plan always with, I've seen entrepreneurs with 3-4 weeks of cash very calmly, like, yeah, no worries, because this is going to happen and that. And you are still, I mean, entrepreneurs are how do you say that? Are sick optimists, right? They're really like crazy optimists, because if not, they would never be entrepreneurs, which makes sense. But you need to be thinking that, what's the worst case scenario? I mean, if I don't get all this money, I think, what is my plan B? Or even worse, I mean, we had a few acquisition offers before the one that finally went through. Then you start thinking, wow, this is going to happen. I'm not going to pay the payroll anymore, because, I mean, somebody else is going to pay the payroll after the acquisition. But then it doesn't go through. And then you have to pay the payroll again. And you're like, what? So what is your plan B, your plan C, your plan D? Are you able to raise funds or not? Are you able to access venture debt or not? And you cannot just think that, no worries, because everything is going to be fine. And I'm going to be just meet my whole goals. Make yourself always have some room, right? And the other thing that happens is that then you raise too much money, and then you start like thinking you can do everything at once, as we said before, and then you expand too much, do too much hires, too much money in marketing, and that's very dangerous. So I think burn rate needs to be kept really in jail, right? And if your monthly bookings are lower than your monthly burn rate, be careful.
Again, very, very good points. Also taking notes as we speak. And nowadays, as you're saying, as you were also commenting now, we are seeing larger and larger rounds, and we are seeing also less patience with growth rates. As we were discussing when we were opening up the show, there is this triple 2 times, double 3 times. We also have the SaaS napkin from Point 9 and Christoph Jens.
Great guys, by the way, great guys, yeah.
Absolutely. That also talks about this kind of rates in terms of metrics that would be important to raise the next round. So it's all about doubling or tripling revenues every year. As you were saying, sometimes we face some growth plateaus, and this can make the founders very desperate, especially first-time founders, of what would be the solution. I would say even senior founders, it might not be easy to then face this plateau and try to find out a solution to go through that. So how important do you think it is to really show growth of 2x or 3x every single year during the scaling up journey?
I mean, it's very, very important, and this is a power distribution, right? So the best get the best funding from the most connected VCs, which then gets to the next stage, and then you get more publicity and you get more leads, and then so it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy once you are getting scale. So if you derail, it's very, very hard. Very how you can get back, right? So I mean, but then we've seen that some of the most successful IPOs this year were a much longer story with a lot of hiccups. They had good years, bad years. So I would say you need to be focusing on traction, but you cannot get obsessed about that. And what does it mean? I mean, maybe you need more time. Maybe for a few years you're gonna have this plateau, and for sure VCs and investors will push you. No, go on, grow, because I need you to be following my chart of the perfect company. But that's a bit of a myth of the perfect company. The only issue is that maybe you need to raise money, and then you won't be able to have the story that supports your funding. So have more money in the bank, focus more on profitability, right? Be close to profitability so that you don't depend so much on external funding. And then maybe you will have one year which is a bit worse, and this 15% monthly growth, right? MRR 15%, and then you make 1 month 8%, is like, oh, disaster. Come on, I mean, you made an 80% monthly growth. I mean, so try to be coherent in thinking I'm going when I want to go. Are my customers happy? What is my churn rate? I mean, I am providing something of value. Maybe it takes a bit more of time, but it would not be such a big issue, right? Yeah. And sorry, guys, you will hear the phone now clicking.
No worries. And we are coming to the end of the show. In principle, not a time that you would get the phone, but yeah. So if you would have the opportunity, and now I will let you choose, or even both, to get to the beginning of when you joined it at Carto or when you joined it Telefónica, or both. What advice would you offer to your younger self? Let's do the exercise as an operator and as an investor. I think it would be nice to have those two advices for yourself.
Good. So, I mean, joining Wida, more than an advice as an investor, which I think is a good point, it's an advice going into the corporate life, right? Which is also, it's also a big thing. So I would say when you join the corporation, corporations are incredible at scale. They can do massive things and they are unstoppable. I mean, I'm now still like, wow, flabbergasted by how this can happen at this scale in all these countries. I'm loving it. But there's less questioning, right? So there is more the hierarchy and the orders. So my advice to my younger me 1.5 years ago and to my future me is keep on questioning everything, right? Don't just adjust to rules if they are absurd. Don't let bureaucracy eat you, right? Try to be the same person you were as an entrepreneur, because the inertia of the corporation is massive, right? So that would be the advice for the corporate side of things. And as entrepreneurs, I would say the key advice to my younger self is hire the right VPs quicker. So surround yourself as quickly as possible with the people, the men, and particularly the women, because that's a big thing. We need to work much harder on entrepreneurship and an executive team and startups, is find the ladies which are going to bring you to the next stage, because the team trumps totally everything.
Amazing way of closing the show. Miguel, it was really a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mike. It was my pleasure. Bye-bye.
And to our community, thank you so much for joining us today. We keep showing up every single week to help you go from 2 million to 100 million, if possible in 10 years or less, without so much drama and so much stress. Thank you so much for joining again. See you next week.